I stared at my laptop screen, my coffee cup slipping from trembling fingers and crashing to the dorm room floor. The words "application withdrawn" glowed mockingly where my Harvard Medical School submission should have shown "complete." 4 years of perfect grades, countless sleepless nights, and 20-hour volunteer shifts at Denver General Hospital were apparently meaningless now. My phone buzzed with a text from Bethany. "Deleted your med school application. Now you can't compete with me." The betrayal cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. My own sister had just destroyed my future. Growing up in the tree-lined suburbs of Lakewood, Colorado, Bethany and I had always been different sides of the same coin. She was the golden child who could charm teachers into extensions and parents into forgiveness with her bright smile and easy laugh. I was the quiet one who earned everything through sheer determination and endless study sessions that stretched until dawn. Our mother, Patricia, worked as a nurse practitioner at Rose Medical Center, coming home each evening with stories about saving lives and making differences. Our father, Robert, balanced budgets at his accounting firm, but always lit up when discussing Mom's medical cases over dinner. From age 10, both Bethany and I declared our intentions to follow Mom into medicine, but for vastly different reasons. Bethany saw the prestige, the respect, the comfortable lifestyle that came with a medical degree. She wanted people to call her Dr. Anderson and admire her success. I saw something deeper in Mom's exhausted but satisfied face each night, the profound fulfillment of healing others, of being trusted with someone's most vulnerable moments. High school intensified our competition. While I spent Friday nights in the chemistry lab perfecting titration techniques, Bethany attended parties and cultivated relationships with influential families. When I volunteered at the free clinic downtown, she joined the hospital's youth advisory board that mostly involved fundraising galas. Our parents praised her social skills while acknowledging my academic achievements with proud but measured nods. The real divide emerged during our college years. I chose University of Colorado Boulder for their exceptional pre-med program and threw myself into organic chemistry, calculus, and advanced biology courses that made other students transfer majors. My sophomore year, I landed a research assistant position with Dr. Elena Rodriguez in the neuroscience department, spending weekends analyzing brain tissue samples and learning laboratory protocols that graduate students struggled to master. Bethany selected Colorado State University, claiming their psychology program would give her an edge in patient relations. She maintained a solid 3.7 GPA while balancing sorority responsibilities, student government positions, and an active social calendar that included networking events with Denver's medical community. My MCAT preparation consumed 6 months of my life. I took practice tests every Saturday morning, attended prep courses on Sunday afternoons, and memorized biochemical pathways until I could recite them backwards. When my score arrived, 518 out of 528, I finally allowed myself to imagine walking through medical school halls. Bethany's 508 was respectable, but we both knew which schools would take notice. She celebrated her score with a weekend trip to Vegas with sorority sisters. I immediately began researching potential research mentors at Harvard, Johns Hopkins, and Stanford. The application process became my obsession. I spent 3 weeks crafting my personal statement, writing and rewriting the narrative of watching Mom save a choking infant at a restaurant when I was 12 years old. Professor Martinez, my biochemistry mentor, spent hours helping me articulate my research experience with mitochondrial dysfunction in Alzheimer's patients. Dr. Susan Yang from the emergency department where I volunteered wrote what she called the strongest recommendation letter of her career. Bethany approached applications differently. She hired a consultant who specialized in medical school admissions, paying $3,000 for essay review and interview coaching. Her personal statement focused on her leadership experiences and passion for mental health advocacy, themes that tested well with admissions committees. As deadline day approached, I had submitted to 7 top-tier programs: Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Stanford, Mayo Clinic's Medical School, University of Pennsylvania, Washington University, and St. Louis and Duke. Each application represented countless hours of preparation, from requesting transcripts to scheduling interviews with research supervisors who could vouch for my laboratory skills. Bethany applied to 12 programs, casting a wider net that included several mid-tier schools where her statistics would be competitive. She seemed confident, even relaxed, as submission deadlines loomed. I attributed her calm demeanor to her natural optimism and social confidence. The morning everything changed started ordinarily enough. I woke up at 6:30 in my shared apartment near campus, made coffee, and opened my laptop to perform my daily ritual of checking application statuses. Each school's portal had become as familiar as my own reflection. Harvard's crimson header, Johns Hopkins' blue interface, Stanford's clean white design. Harvard's portal loaded differently that morning. Instead of the familiar application under review status, stark black text announced, "Application withdrawn by applicant." My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked frantically through every menu option, searching for some technical error or misunderstanding. The timestamp showed the withdrawal had occurred at 2:37 that morning. I had been sound asleep, my laptop locked and sitting on my nightstand. Panic rising in my throat like bile, I checked Johns Hopkins. Same message, Stanford, Duke. Every single application showed identical withdrawal notices, all timestamped between 2 and 3 in the morning. My roommate Jessica found me hyperventilating on the bathroom floor 20 minutes later, my phone clutched in one shaking hand while the other gripped the toilet bowl. She helped me to the couch and brought water while I tried to explain what had happened. That's when Bethany's text arrived, delivered with the casual cruelty that only family members can perfect. "Deleted your med school application, now you can't compete with me." The message was followed by a string of laughing emoji and a photo of her acceptance letter to University of Colorado School of Medicine, dated 3 days earlier. She had been celebrating her success while methodically destroying mine. Jessica immediately called campus security while I frantically contacted each school's admissions office. The deadline had passed at midnight. No appeals were accepted. 4 years of perfect preparation had been erased by someone who shared my DNA and childhood bedroom. Professor Martinez arrived within an hour, his usually composed demeanor cracking when I showed him the evidence. He had guided dozens of students through medical school applications over his 20-year career, but had never encountered deliberate sabotage between siblings. "This is criminal behavior, Earnestine," he said, quietly examining the withdrawal confirmations on my laptop screen. "We're not going to let her get away with this." But as I sat in his office that afternoon, surrounded by testimonials from professors who believed in my potential and recommendation letters that praised my character, I wondered if belief and potential would be enough to overcome Bethany's calculated betrayal. The worst part wasn't the destroyed applications. It was the creeping realization that this level of sabotage required intimate knowledge of my passwords, my schedule, and my deepest vulnerabilities. Bethany hadn't just deleted my medical school dreams on a whim. She had been planning this attack for months. Professor Martinez's weathered hands drummed against his mahogany desk as he scrolled through his contacts list on an outdated smartphone. The afternoon sun slanted through his office windows, illuminating dust particles that danced like my scattered hopes for medical school. "I'm calling someone who can help," he announced, his accent thickening with determination. Eduardo Martinez had emigrated from Guatemala 30 years earlier and built a distinguished career in biochemistry through sheer persistence. He understood the value of hard work and despised those who tried to circumvent it. The person he called was Dr. Amanda Williams, a family friend who served on the admissions committee at University of California, San Francisco Medical School. Within 2 hours, she was driving up from Denver to examine the evidence of Bethany's sabotage. Dr. Williams arrived carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the kind of professional confidence that comes from 2 decades of evaluating medical school candidates. She listened patiently as I recounted the morning's discoveries, taking notes on a yellow legal pad, while occasionally asking clarifying questions about timeline and technical details. Medical school application portals aren't just simple websites, she explained, pulling out her laptop and connecting to the university's secure network. They're sophisticated tracking systems that monitor every click, keystroke, and login attempt. Schools use this data to identify fraudulent activity and ensure application integrity. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she accessed administrative portals I had never seen. Screen after screen of technical data appeared: IP addresses, timestamp logs, geographic location information, and user behavior patterns that painted a detailed picture of every interaction with my applications. "Look at this," Dr. Williams said, rotating her laptop screen toward Professor Martinez and me. Your normal login pattern shows consistent access from your apartment's internet connection and occasionally from the university library. But these withdrawal requests all originated from an IP address registered to a residential location in Fort Collins. Fort Collins was where Bethany lived during her senior year at Colorado State University. The evidence was already building, but Dr. Williams wasn't finished with her digital archaeology. Modern application systems also track behavioral patterns. She continued opening another analysis program. They monitor how long users spend on each page, which sections they review, and how they navigate through menus. Someone familiar with your application would move quickly through sections knowing exactly where to find withdrawal options. The data logs showed the perpetrator had spent less than 3 minutes per application to complete the withdrawals, the actions of someone who knew exactly what they were looking for and how to find it efficiently. My boyfriend Marcus arrived just as Dr. Williams was explaining the technical sophistication required for the attack. A computer science major in his final semester, Marcus had been my steady support throughout the stress of medical school applications. His dark hair was disheveled from rushing across campus when I called him in tears. "This isn't just password theft," Marcus said after reviewing the evidence. "Someone had to know your security questions, your backup email addresses, and your verification preferences. This level of access suggests long-term surveillance of your digital habits." The revelation hit me like ice water. Bethany hadn't just stolen my passwords, she had been systematically studying my online behavior for months, possibly years. Every time I logged into applications from our family's shared computer during holiday visits, every casual mention of security questions during family conversations, every moment of trust had been weaponized against my future. Dr. Williams made several phone calls to colleagues at medical schools, speaking in hushed tones about unprecedented fraud cases and interstate cybercrime implications. The academic medical community was smaller and more interconnected than I had realized. Within hours, word was spreading about the sophisticated nature of Bethany's attack. Marcus began his own investigation using computer forensics techniques learned in his cybersecurity classes. He discovered that Bethany had been accessing my email accounts for over 8 months, reading correspondence with medical school recruiters and research mentors. She had even intercepted and deleted several interview invitations, explaining why I had received fewer callbacks than my statistics suggested I should expect. "She didn't just want to beat you," Marcus said grimly, showing me evidence of deleted emails. "She wanted to make sure you never even got a chance to compete." The scope of betrayal expanded as Marcus uncovered additional evidence. Bethany had systematically undermined my applications in ways I never suspected. She had unsubscribed me from several medical school mailing lists, causing me to miss important deadline reminders and supplemental application opportunities. She had even altered some of my draft essays, introducing subtle grammatical errors and logical inconsistencies that could have weakened my candidacy. Professor Martinez contacted his network of colleagues across the country, sharing details about the sophisticated fraud while protecting my privacy. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Medical school administrators who had never heard my name were expressing outrage at the violation of application integrity. By evening, I was receiving phone calls from deans and admissions directors at schools where I had never applied. Word had spread through professional conferences and academic email lists about a promising pre-medical student whose own sister had committed application fraud to eliminate competition. Dr. Sarah Chen, Dean of Admissions at Johns Hopkins Medical School, called personally to discuss what she termed an unprecedented breach of academic ethics. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had reviewed tens of thousands of medical school applications during her career. "We've been tracking unusual patterns in application submissions for several months," Dean Chen revealed during our 30-minute conversation. "Your case has provided crucial evidence for a much larger investigation into systematic fraud affecting medical school admissions nationwide." The conversation took an unexpected turn when Dean Chen explained that top-tier medical schools had been collaborating to identify and prevent application fraud. They had noticed correlations between withdrawn applications and suspicious submissions from other candidates, suggesting organized efforts to game the system. "Your sister's activities have been under surveillance for longer than you know," Dean Chen said carefully. "We've been building a comprehensive case that involves multiple schools and federal law enforcement agencies." As I hung up the phone, the magnitude of the situation began crystallizing. This wasn't just about sibling rivalry or family dysfunction. Bethany had apparently orchestrated a sophisticated fraud operation that threatened the integrity of medical education itself. Marcus spent the night in my apartment, both of us staying awake to monitor his computer programs that were analyzing digital evidence. By sunrise, we had uncovered a network of interconnected fraud, spanning multiple states and involving several other pre-medical students. The evidence showed that Bethany had been coordinating with at least two other individuals, Tyler Morrison from her study group, and Madison Wells, a family friend whose father was a prominent surgeon in Denver. Together, they had developed a systematic approach to sabotaging competitors while enhancing their own applications through plagiarism and deception. But the most shocking discovery came at 6 a.m. when Marcus successfully recovered deleted files from Bethany's social media accounts. Hidden in archived messages was a detailed plan to eliminate what she called the top 5 threats to their medical school acceptance chances. My name was at the top of that list. The coffee shop near campus buzzed with the usual morning energy of students rushing to 8 o'clock classes, but I felt disconnected from the familiar chaos. Dr. Williams had arranged a meeting with someone she described only as a person who can help explain what's really been happening. The cryptic introduction made my stomach churn with anxiety about what new revelations awaited. Dean Sarah Chen walked through the front door at exactly 9:30, her silver hair catching morning sunlight and her presence commanding immediate attention. Even in casual khaki slacks and a navy blazer, she radiated the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that shaped medical careers. Earnestine Thompson, she said, extending a firm handshake. I've heard exceptional things about your academic record and research contributions. We found a quiet corner table where Dean Chen ordered black coffee and opened a leather portfolio filled with documents that would reshape my understanding of everything that had happened. Medical school admissions has evolved far beyond simply reviewing transcripts and test scores. She began, her voice carrying the measured tone of someone accustomed to delivering complex information. We now employ sophisticated monitoring systems that track applicant behavior patterns across multiple platforms and institutions. She explained that consortium of top medical schools had been developing advanced security protocols to combat increasing fraud in applications. The system monitored everything from essay plagiarism to suspicious patterns in recommendation letters, creating comprehensive digital profiles of potential misconduct. We first noticed irregularities in applications submitted from Colorado approximately 8 months ago. Dean Chen continued, sliding a printed analysis across the table. Multiple candidates were submitting nearly identical personal statements with only minor variations in word choice and sentence structure. The document showed side-by-side comparisons of essay excerpts that were clearly derived from common sources. Bethany's name appeared multiple times in the analysis, along with Tyler Morrison and Madison Wells. They had been sharing and modifying each other's work while presenting it as original writing. But the plagiarism was just the beginning. Dean Chen said, opening a second folder. Our monitoring systems detected coordinated attempts to withdraw competing applications from multiple IP addresses associated with the same geographic region. My heart raced as she showed me evidence that Bethany's attack on my applications was part of a systematic campaign targeting dozens of high-achieving pre-medical students across Colorado and neighboring states. The conspirators had created a sophisticated network for identifying threats and eliminating competition through digital sabotage. We've been documenting their activities for months, Dean Chen explained. Your case provided the final piece of evidence we needed to involve federal law enforcement agencies. The revelation that FBI investigators had been monitoring Bethany's activities left me speechless. What I had interpreted as sibling jealousy was actually organized crime that had attracted national attention from cybercrime specialists. Dean Chen's phone buzzed with a text message that made her smile for the first time during our conversation. Agent Rodriguez will be joining us shortly. She's the lead investigator on what the Bureau has designated as Operation Clean Slate. Special Agent Maria Rodriguez arrived 15 minutes later wearing a charcoal business suit and carrying herself with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to pursuing criminals who believe themselves untouchable. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp and analytical as she assessed my reactions to increasingly shocking revelations. Miss Thompson, your sister, and her associates have been conducting what we term academic terrorism. Agent Rodriguez explained, pulling out a tablet loaded with evidence files. They've systematically targeted over 60 high-achieving pre-medical students across 7 states using techniques ranging from identity theft to computer fraud. The scope of Bethany's criminal enterprise was staggering. She had recruited accomplices at multiple universities, creating a network that shared stolen application materials and coordinated attacks on competing candidates. They had even developed sophisticated methods for hacking into recommendation letter systems and altering professor evaluations to benefit members of their group. Your deleted applications actually triggered our entire investigation, Agent Rodriguez revealed. The patterns were so obvious to our monitoring systems that we immediately recognized organized fraud rather than individual misconduct. Dean Chen opened a third folder containing what she described as good news that's been a long time coming. The consortium of medical schools had been preparing a response to Bethany's fraud network that would permanently ban all participants from accredited medical programs while providing remediation for their victims. We've been documenting evidence for potential prosecution, but we've also been preparing to help students like you who were harmed by these criminal activities, she explained. Your original applications were never actually lost. We have complete records of everything you submitted. The relief that flooded through me was overwhelming, but Agent Rodriguez cautioned that justice would require patience and cooperation. The federal case against Bethany's network involved multiple jurisdictions and would take months to fully prosecute. We need you to understand that this investigation is much larger than your personal situation. Agent Rodriguez explained. Your sister has been operating as part of an organized crime syndicate that has defrauded medical schools, violated federal computer crime laws, and damaged the integrity of medical education. Dean Chen pulled out a final document that made my hands shake as I read the official letterhead of Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. It was an acceptance letter dated 3 days earlier, offering me admission with a full scholarship and a position in their prestigious research program. We've been waiting for the right moment to extend this offer, she said with genuine warmth. Based on your original application materials and the extraordinary circumstances you've endured, our admissions committee voted unanimously to accept you with our most generous financial package. But Agent Rodriguez cautioned that Bethany's criminal behavior was far from over. Federal surveillance had detected recent attempts by her network to hack into medical school databases and create false transcripts for offshore programs that might not be aware of their blacklisting. Your sister is facing federal charges that could result in significant prison time, Agent Rodriguez said soberly. She's also facing civil lawsuits from multiple medical schools, seeking restitution for investigative costs and system security upgrades. As we prepared to leave the coffee shop, Dean Chen mentioned one more crucial detail that would define the next phase of this ordeal. The medical school consortium has decided to make an example of this case, she said. We're holding a joint press conference tomorrow to announce the permanent blacklisting of all network participants and the enhanced security measures we're implementing to prevent similar fraud. The thought of public attention made me anxious, but Dean Chen assured me that my identity would be protected while Bethany faced the full consequences of her criminal choices. She destroyed your privacy when she stole your applications, Agent Rodriguez added. Now she's going to face public accountability for what she's done to you and dozens of other students. As I walked back to my apartment with Marcus, who had been quietly taking notes throughout the meeting, I realized that tomorrow would bring either complete vindication or an entirely new level of family chaos that I wasn't sure I was prepared to handle. The text message from Bethany arrived just as we reached my front door. We need to talk, now. But after everything I had learned about her criminal network and federal investigation, I knew the time for family conversations had passed. Tomorrow, she would face consequences that even her charm and manipulation couldn't talk her way out of. The pounding on my apartment door at 6 a.m. jolted me from the first peaceful sleep I'd experienced in days. Through the peephole, I saw Agent Rodriguez flanked by 2 other federal investigators, their faces grim but purposeful. Search warrants were executed simultaneously at 7 locations across 3 states. she announced as I opened the door, still wearing pajamas and trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. "We need you to identify some materials we recovered from your sister's residence." Marcus emerged from the bedroom alert despite the early hour as Agent Rodriguez spread evidence bags across my kitchen table. The contents looked like the remnants of a sophisticated criminal operation: multiple laptops, external hard drives, printed emails, handwritten notes detailing target lists, and what appeared to be fake identification documents. "Your sister had been preparing to flee the country," Agent Rodriguez explained, holding up a folder containing airline reservations to the Cayman Islands and application materials for Caribbean medical schools. She was planning to continue her fraud operation internationally using a false identity. The laptop screens showed browser histories that revealed the true scope of Bethany's criminal network. She had been researching medical schools in countries with less rigorous background check procedures, identifying programs where her fraudulent activities might go undetected. The level of premeditation was staggering. Tyler Morrison and Madison Wells had been arrested simultaneously at their respective homes, and both were already cooperating with federal investigators in exchange for reduced sentences. Their confessions painted a disturbing picture of Bethany as the mastermind behind an operation that had been systematically destroying competitors' futures for over 2 years. Morrison provided us with chat logs going back 18 months. Agent Rodriguez said, opening a thick binder of printed messages, "Your sister was recruiting accomplices across multiple universities and developing increasingly sophisticated techniques for academic fraud." The evidence showed that Bethany had created detailed profiles of high-achieving pre-medical students, studying their social media posts, class schedules, and family backgrounds to identify vulnerabilities. She had even infiltrated study groups and volunteer organizations to gather intelligence about potential targets. My phone buzzed with a call from Dean Chen, whose voice carried a mixture of satisfaction and concern. "The joint press conference is beginning in 2 hours. Medical school administrators from across the country are announcing the permanent blacklisting of all network participants." The press conference was broadcast live on academic news networks and medical school websites. I watched from my apartment as a panel of distinguished deans announced what they termed the most comprehensive fraud investigation in medical education history. The individuals involved in this criminal network have been permanently banned from all accredited medical programs in the United States, announced Dr. Patricia Williams from Harvard Medical School, her voice carrying the weight of institutional authority. "We are also coordinating with international medical education organizations to ensure these bans are recognized globally." The camera panned across a room filled with reporters and medical education officials as the deans detailed the sophisticated nature of Bethany's fraud network. They had stolen application materials from over 60 students, altered recommendation letters, hacked into university computer systems, and even created false transcripts to enhance their own candidacy. My parents called within minutes of the announcement, their voices shaking with disbelief and shame. "We had no idea." Mom kept repeating, her professional composure completely shattered. "How could we have raised someone capable of this?" Dad's accounting background helped him quickly grasp the financial implications of Bethany's crimes. The medical schools were seeking restitution payments exceeding $200,000 for investigative costs, system security upgrades, and damage to institutional reputation. We're going to have to sell the house," he said quietly during our emotional phone conversation. "The legal fees alone are going to bankrupt us, and that's before any restitution payments." The family I had grown up with was disintegrating in real time, and I felt simultaneously vindicated and heartbroken watching my parents confront the reality of their favorite daughter's criminal behavior. Agent Rodriguez returned that afternoon with news that Bethany's arraignment had been scheduled for the following morning. Federal prosecutors were recommending significant prison time based on the scope of her criminal enterprise and evidence of ongoing fraudulent activities even after the initial investigation had begun. "She's been trying to contact you repeatedly," Agent Rodriguez warned, showing me logs of attempted phone calls and text messages that had been intercepted as part of the investigation. "She's claiming she wants to apologize, but our behavioral analysts believe she's actually trying to manipulate you into providing character testimony." The psychological evaluation ordered by federal prosecutors painted a disturbing portrait of someone with narcissistic personality disorder who viewed other people's achievements as personal threats requiring elimination. Bethany had genuinely convinced herself that she was entitled to success, regardless of the methods required to achieve it. Marcus spent the day researching legal precedents for federal computer crime prosecutions, discovering that similar cases had resulted in sentences ranging from 3 to 10 years, depending on the financial damage and number of victims involved. With over 60 confirmed victims and hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages, Bethany was facing the upper end of federal sentencing guidelines. The University of Colorado issued a statement that afternoon announcing the creation of new scholarship programs for students who had been victimized by academic fraud. The Academic Integrity Recovery Scholarship would provide financial support for victims while they rebuilt their educational and career prospects. Your case has become a catalyst for positive change across the entire medical education system. Professor Martinez explained during a phone call filled with pride and amazement. Medical schools are implementing security measures that will protect future generations of students from this type of fraud. But the most profound moment came when Dean Chen called to inform me that Johns Hopkins wasn't the only school offering acceptance. Based on the extraordinary circumstances and my proven resilience, I was receiving admission offers from Harvard, Stanford, Mayo Clinic, and 3 other top-tier medical programs. You have choices that most students only dream about, she said warmly. The medical education community recognizes that you've demonstrated exactly the kind of character and integrity we want in future physicians. The irony wasn't lost on me that Bethany's attempts to destroy my medical school prospects had actually resulted in opportunities beyond anything I had initially imagined. Her criminal behavior had exposed my qualifications to admissions officers who might never have noticed my application under normal circumstances. As evening approached, I realized that tomorrow would bring the final confrontation with my sister. The federal courthouse where her arraignment was scheduled had become the setting for a reckoning that had been years in the making. Agent Rodriguez warned me that Bethany would likely attempt some final manipulation during our inevitable encounter. But after everything I had learned about her systematic cruelty and criminal sophistication, I felt prepared to face whatever desperate tactics she might employ. The text message that arrived just before midnight confirmed what I had expected. Please come to the courthouse tomorrow. I have something important to tell you about why I did this. You deserve to understand the truth. But I already understood the truth. Bethany had chosen to become a criminal rather than accept fair competition, and tomorrow she would face consequences that no amount of charm or manipulation could overcome. The federal courthouse steps buzzed with media activity as I approached the imposing granite building where Bethany's fate would be decided. News crews from local television stations had positioned cameras to capture what reporters were calling one of the most significant academic fraud cases in recent history. Agent Rodriguez met me at the security checkpoint, her professional demeanor softening slightly as she guided me through the media gauntlet. Your sister has been asking to speak with you before the hearing. You're under no obligation to see her, but if you choose to, we'll monitor the conversation. The visitation room felt sterile and cold, separated by reinforced glass that reflected my nervous expression back at me. When Bethany entered wearing an Orange County Jail jumpsuit, I barely recognized the confident, manipulative sister who had tormented my childhood and destroyed my applications. Her blonde hair hung limp and unwashed her usually perfect makeup, replaced by dark circles under eyes that seemed to have aged years in just days. The designer clothes and practiced smile that had charmed professors and parents were gone, leaving only a frightened young woman facing the consequences of choices that had spiraled far beyond her control. Earnestine, she said through the intercom, her voice cracking with what sounded like genuine remorse for the first time in our relationship. I know you probably hate me, but I needed to explain why I did what I did. I remained silent, waiting for whatever final manipulation she had prepared, but the words that came surprised me with their raw honesty. I was terrified that you were going to succeed where I would fail. She admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. You were always the smart one, the one who earned everything through hard work, and I knew that if we both applied to medical school, you would get into better programs than me. Her confession continued for 20 minutes, revealing years of insecurity and jealousy that had festered into criminal behavior. She described feeling constant pressure to maintain the facade of being the perfect daughter while watching me achieve genuine academic excellence that she could never match. I convinced myself that if I could just level the playing field, we could both succeed, she said desperately. I never intended for it to become this complicated or to hurt so many other people. But as she spoke, I realized that even in her supposed moment of honesty, Bethany was still trying to manipulate the narrative. She portrayed herself as a victim of family pressure rather than accepting responsibility for calculated criminal choices that had destroyed dozens of futures. I've been offered a plea agreement, she said finally, her voice dropping to a whisper. 3 years in federal prison plus restitution payments, but I need you to provide a character reference saying that this wasn't who I really am. The request confirmed that her emotional display was just another manipulation tactic. Even facing federal prison, she was still trying to use our family relationship to minimize consequences for her criminal behavior. No, I said, simply standing to leave. You made your choices, and now you get to live with the results. Her facade crumbled completely as I walked away, her screams of anger and accusations echoing through the visitation facility. The real Bethany was finally visible, not a misunderstood victim, but a narcissistic criminal whose sense of entitlement had destroyed any possibility of family reconciliation. The arraignment proceeding was swift and decisive. Federal prosecutor Jennifer Martinez detailed the scope of Bethany's criminal network, describing it as a sophisticated fraud operation that threatened the integrity of medical education nationwide. When Judge Patricia Thompson asked if she understood the charges, Bethany's voice was barely audible as she pleaded guilty to federal computer fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy charges. The recommended sentence of 3 to 5 years federal prison seemed almost anticlimactic after the dramatic scope of her crimes. Tyler Morrison and Madison Wells had already accepted plea agreements in exchange for cooperation, receiving shorter sentences that reflected their secondary roles in the conspiracy. But as the alleged ringleader, Bethany faced the harshest penalties and would serve as an example for any future would-be academic fraudsters. Outside the courthouse, Dean Chen held an impromptu press conference announcing the launch of comprehensive reforms in medical school application security, the Thompson Protocol. Named in my honor, would implement advanced monitoring systems designed to prevent the type of sophisticated fraud that Bethany's network had perpetrated. This case has demonstrated both the vulnerability of our current systems and the resilience of students who maintain academic integrity despite extraordinary challenges, Dean Chen announced to the assembled reporters. We're committed to ensuring that future generations of medical students are protected from this type of criminal behavior. The attention was overwhelming but also deeply gratifying. Multiple medical schools announced scholarship programs for fraud victims, and the Association of American Medical Colleges invited me to speak at their annual conference about the importance of academic integrity. Marcus proposed that evening in my apartment, choosing the moment when media attention had finally died down, and we could focus on our future rather than Bethany's destructive past. His ring was simple but beautiful, and his proposal speech focused on building a life based on honest achievement and mutual support. I want to spend my life with someone who chooses integrity even when it's difficult, he said, dropping to one knee beside the kitchen table where we had first examined evidence of Bethany's crimes. You've shown me what real character looks like. The wedding planning provided a welcome distraction from ongoing legal proceedings and media interviews. We decided on a small ceremony focusing on people who had supported us through the crisis, rather than trying to navigate the complex family dynamics created by Bethany's criminal behavior. My parents attended, their shame and guilt still evident but tempered by pride in how I had handled the situation. They had begun family therapy to address the favoritism and enabling behaviors that had contributed to Bethany's sense of entitlement, and our relationship was slowly healing. The most meaningful moment came when Professor Martinez walked me down the aisle, symbolizing how academic mentorship had provided the family support that blood relatives had failed to offer. His pride in my resilience and future medical career brought tears to everyone present. Johns Hopkins Medical School offered me a deferred admission that would allow time for the media attention to subside and legal proceedings to conclude. The full scholarship included funding for research projects and conference presentations that would help establish my career in medical ethics and fraud prevention. The irony of Bethany's crimes creating opportunities for me to specialize in academic integrity wasn't lost on anyone. Her attempts to destroy my future had actually revealed my calling to help prevent similar crimes against future students. 6 months after the arraignment, I received my final vindication when the medical school consortium announced that security measures developed in response to Bethany's fraud had already prevented 12 additional fraud attempts across the country. Her criminal behavior had inadvertently strengthened the entire medical education system. But the most satisfying moment came when Agent Rodriguez called to inform me that Bethany's attempts to continue her fraud operation from prison had resulted in additional federal charges. She had been using contraband cell phones to coordinate with international conspirators, adding years to her eventual sentence. "Some people never learn," Agent Rodriguez said with professional detachment. "Your sister appears determined to remain a criminal regardless of consequences." As I prepared to begin medical school with Marcus by my side and a clear career path focused on academic integrity, I realized that Bethany's betrayal had ultimately revealed my own strength and resilience. Her worst moment had become the foundation for my best opportunities. The call from Agent Rodriguez came on a Tuesday morning in early September, just weeks before I was scheduled to begin medical school at Johns Hopkins. Her voice carried a mixture of amazement and professional frustration as she delivered news that would close one chapter of Bethany's criminal saga while opening another. "Your sister has been caught running a new fraud operation from federal prison." She announced, her tone suggesting this development surprised even seasoned investigators. "She's been using smuggled cell phones to coordinate with international conspirators attempting to infiltrate Caribbean medical schools." The sophistication of Bethany's continued criminal activity was staggering. Federal monitoring had detected her communications with individuals in the Cayman Islands, Dominican Republic, and several other locations where offshore medical programs offered less rigorous background screening procedures. She's been selling falsified transcripts and recommendation letters to blacklisted students who are willing to pay premium prices for fraudulent credentials, Agent Rodriguez explained. "We've documented transactions totaling over $50,000 in just the past 3 months." The investigation revealed that Bethany had recruited fellow inmates with computer crime backgrounds to help establish an international network for academic fraud. Using contraband technology and coded communications, she had essentially turned her prison cell into the headquarters for a global counterfeiting operation. Marcus drove with me to the federal courthouse where additional arraignment proceedings were scheduled for the expanded charges. The media attention had intensified again, with educational journals and cybercrime publications covering what legal experts were calling unprecedented criminal persistence. Most defendants try to minimize their exposure during sentencing proceedings, explained defense attorney Michael Chen, who had been appointed to represent Bethany after her family's financial resources were exhausted by restitution payments. "Your sister appears determined to maximize her criminal liability regardless of consequences." The courtroom was packed with representatives from medical schools, federal investigators, and international education officials who had traveled to witness what prosecutors were calling a cautionary tale about the lengths some individuals will pursue fraudulent success. When Bethany entered wearing shackles and a federal prison uniform, I was struck by how much she had changed during her incarceration. The confident manipulation that had defined her personality was replaced by a desperate defiance that suggested she had completely lost touch with reality. Federal prosecutor Jennifer Martinez presented evidence that painted a disturbing picture of criminal escalation rather than rehabilitation. Bethany had not only continued her fraud operation from prison, but had expanded its scope and international reach while facing existing federal charges. The defendant has demonstrated complete disregard for legal consequences and institutional authority, Prosecutor Martinez announced to Judge Patricia Thompson. Her continued criminal behavior while incarcerated suggests she poses an ongoing threat to educational institutions worldwide. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Federal investigators had recorded phone calls where Bethany discussed creating false identities for clients, establishing fake recommendation letter services, and even planning to establish fraudulent medical school programs in countries with minimal regulatory oversight. Tyler Morrison and Madison Wells appeared as prosecution witnesses, their cooperation agreements requiring them to testify about Bethany's role as the criminal mastermind who had recruited them into academic fraud. Their testimony revealed years of manipulation and intimidation that had forced them into criminal behavior they had initially resisted. Bethany threatened to destroy our academic careers if we didn't participate in her schemes. Tyler testified, his voice shaking with emotion. She had already demonstrated her ability to ruin other students' futures, so we felt we had no choice but to cooperate. Madison's testimony was even more damaging, revealing that Bethany had been documenting their criminal activities to maintain leverage over accomplices. She had created detailed files containing evidence that could destroy their futures if they ever attempted to withdraw from her network. She called it mutual assured destruction. Madison explained to the packed courtroom. She made sure everyone was so deeply involved in criminal behavior that no one could expose her without destroying themselves. But the most shocking testimony came from a fellow inmate who described Bethany's behavior during her incarceration. Rather than expressing remorse or seeking rehabilitation, she had been bragging about her criminal sophistication and recruiting other prisoners for future fraud schemes upon their release. She talked about this like it was a business venture that had been temporarily interrupted by legal complications. Testified Sarah Johnson, whose own computer fraud conviction had made her a target for Bethany's recruitment efforts. She genuinely believed she was smarter than law enforcement and would eventually outsmart the system. Judge Thompson's sentencing decision reflected the extraordinary nature of Bethany's continued criminal behavior. The additional charges carried sentences that would effectively double her federal prison time, with enhanced penalties for criminal activity conducted while incarcerated. And the defendant has demonstrated complete inability to conform her behavior to legal standards. Judge Thompson announced with obvious frustration, "This court has rarely encountered such persistent criminal conduct in the face of clear legal consequences." The final sentence totaled 8 years federal prison plus enhanced restitution payments that would likely exceed $400,000. Bethany's criminal behavior had not only destroyed her own future, but had created financial obligations that would burden her for decades after her eventual release. As she was led away in shackles, Bethany turned toward the gallery where I sat with Marcus and my parents. Her final words were directed at me with the same narcissistic rage that had motivated her original crimes. "This is all your fault," she screamed as bailiffs restrained her. "If you weren't so perfect, I wouldn't have needed to level the playing field. You destroyed our family by being better than me." The outburst confirmed what psychological evaluators had concluded during her pre-sentencing assessment. Bethany was incapable of accepting responsibility for her choices and would likely remain a danger to educational institutions indefinitely. Outside the courthouse, Dean Chen addressed reporters about the broader implications of Bethany's case for medical education security. The international scope of her continued criminal activity had prompted cooperation between American medical schools and educational institutions worldwide to prevent similar fraud schemes. This case has demonstrated that academic fraud is not simply a domestic problem requiring local solutions, she explained to the assembled media. "We're now working with international partners to create global standards for application security and credential verification." My parents approached me with expressions of profound shame and grief, their carefully maintained family image completely shattered by years of legal proceedings and media coverage. Mom had taken early retirement from her nursing position due to the stress and embarrassment of having a convicted criminal daughter. "We're so sorry we didn't see who she really was," Dad said quietly, his accounting precision completely inadequate for calculating the emotional damage Bethany had inflicted on everyone around her. "We enabled her behavior by making excuses and protecting her from consequences." The family therapy they had been attending was helping them understand how their favoritism and enabling had contributed to Bethany's sense of entitlement. But the damage to our relationships would take years to fully address. Some wounds heal, but they leave permanent scars that change the landscape of family dynamics forever. As we drove home that evening, Marcus and I reflected on how completely our lives had been transformed by Bethany's criminal choices. What had begun as sibling rivalry had escalated into federal crimes that would define our family legacy for generations. But her continued criminal behavior had also provided final closure to any lingering doubts about her character or motivations. There was no misunderstood victim beneath the criminal facade, only a narcissistic individual whose sense of entitlement had metastasized into persistent criminality that would likely continue regardless of consequences. The chapter was finally closed, and I could begin medical school without wondering whether Bethany might someday seek redemption or family reconciliation. Her choices had made both outcomes impossible, providing the clarity necessary for me to move forward with my life and career. 3 years later, I stood in the Johns Hopkins commencement ceremony wearing the white coat that had once seemed like an impossible dream. The autumn sunlight filtered through the university's historic columns as Dean Chen prepared to deliver opening remarks to our graduating class of future physicians. Marcus sat in the audience wearing his wedding ring and a proud smile, having completed his cybersecurity degree and landed a position with a Baltimore-based company that specialized in protecting educational institutions from the exact type of fraud that Bethany had perpetrated. Our shared experience had shaped both of our career paths in ways we never could have anticipated. My parents attended the ceremony, their relationship with me slowly healing after years of family therapy and honest conversations about the favoritism and enabling that had contributed to Bethany's criminal behavior. They had sold their dream house in Lakewood to pay restitution costs, but their presence represented a commitment to rebuilding family bonds based on honesty rather than manipulation. Professor Martinez sat in the distinguished faculty section, his pride evident as he watched the student whose potential he had recognized and protected during her darkest moments. He had been instrumental in developing new academic integrity programs that were now being implemented at universities across the country. The ceremony included a special recognition for my work developing the Thompson Protocol, the comprehensive security system that had prevented over 200 fraud attempts during the past 3 years. Medical schools worldwide were implementing similar measures, creating a legacy that transformed educational security standards. Academic integrity is the foundation upon which medical education must be built. I explained during my acceptance speech for the Dean's Award for Ethics in Medicine. When students compromise that integrity, they undermine not only their own futures, but the trust that society places in the medical profession. The audience of graduating students, proud families, and distinguished faculty represented the best of medical education, individuals committed to healing honesty and the highest ethical standards. Standing before them, I reflected on how Bethany's attempted destruction had ultimately strengthened my commitment to these values. My specialization in medical ethics and fraud prevention had emerged naturally from the trauma of her betrayal. The research projects I had completed during medical school focused on identifying psychological factors that predispose individuals toward academic dishonesty and developing intervention programs for at-risk students. The book I had written about overcoming family betrayal and maintaining integrity under extreme pressure was being published by a major academic press, with proceeds supporting scholarship programs for students who had been victimized by academic fraud. Bethany's story had become a cautionary tale that would educate future generations about the importance of ethical behavior. Agent Rodriguez attended the ceremony as my guest, her presence representing the law enforcement community's ongoing commitment to prosecuting academic fraud. The federal task force created in response to Bethany's crimes had become a permanent initiative that protected educational institutions nationwide. "Your sister's case changed how we investigate and prosecute academic fraud," she explained during our conversation after the ceremony. "The protocols developed during that investigation have become standard practice for federal cybercrime units across the country." The latest update on Bethany's situation was sobering but not surprising. She had been transferred to maximum security facilities twice due to continued attempts at fraud and manipulation, even within the prison system. Her projected release date had been extended due to additional infractions and disciplinary issues that suggested complete inability to reform her behavior. "Some individuals are simply incapable of honest behavior," Agent Rodriguez said matter-of-factly. "Your sister appears determined to remain a criminal regardless of circumstances or consequences." The psychological evaluation reports indicated that Bethany had been diagnosed with severe narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial traits that made rehabilitation unlikely. Prison psychologists recommended against early release consideration due to her continued manipulation attempts and lack of genuine remorse. But perhaps the most telling indicator of her unchanged character was the correspondence I had received from her earlier that year. Rather than expressing remorse or seeking reconciliation, she had attempted to convince me to invest in what she described as revolutionary educational consulting services that she planned to launch upon her release. The letter revealed that she was still developing schemes to monetize her criminal expertise, apparently believing that her fraud experience qualified her as an expert consultant for educational security. The complete lack of self-awareness and continued criminal thinking confirmed that prison had done nothing to address her fundamental character defects. I had not responded to her letter, recognizing it as another manipulation attempt designed to re-establish contact that could be exploited for future criminal purposes. The family relationship that had once defined my childhood was permanently severed by choices that could never be forgiven or forgotten. Marcus and I had built our marriage on foundations of honesty, mutual support, and shared commitment to ethical behavior in our professional lives. Our wedding had been small and intimate, focusing on people who had demonstrated genuine care during our most difficult moments, rather than trying to maintain relationships damaged by Bethany's crimes. The apartment we shared near Johns Hopkins was modest, but comfortable, filled with books about medical ethics and cybersecurity, rather than the material possessions that had once symbolized success in my family of origin. Our happiness came from meaningful work and authentic relationships rather than competition or external validation. The scholarship fund we had established in honor of fraud victims had grown to over $100,000, providing financial support for students whose educational dreams had been threatened by criminal behavior. Each recipient represented a victory over the type of destructive behavior that Bethany had chosen to embrace. My residency program in internal medicine would begin in just 2 months, but I was already being recruited by medical schools, interested in my expertise in academic integrity and fraud prevention. The career path that had emerged from trauma was providing opportunities to protect future generations of students from similar victimization. Standing on the steps of Johns Hopkins as newly graduated medical students celebrated with their families, I reflected on the profound transformation that had occurred during the past 4 years. Bethany's attempt to destroy my future had ultimately revealed strength and resilience I never knew I possessed. The most important lesson was that integrity cannot be compromised regardless of pressure, betrayal, or apparent advantage. When individuals choose dishonesty and criminal behavior, they ultimately destroy themselves while strengthening the character of those who maintain ethical standards despite adversity. Marcus joined me on the courthouse steps where this journey had begun, both of us changed by experiences that had tested our commitment to honesty and ethical behavior. The federal building where Bethany had been sentenced now represented justice and accountability rather than family trauma. "Are you ready to start the next chapter?" he asked, taking my hand as we watched other graduates celebrate with their families. "I've been ready since the day she deleted my applications," I replied, realizing that Bethany's betrayal had ultimately provided the foundation for every success that followed. The future stretched ahead, filled with opportunities to heal patients, prevent fraud, and protect other students from the type of criminal behavior that had once threatened to destroy my dreams. Bethany's worst choices had become the catalyst for my best achievements, proving that integrity and persistence ultimately triumph over manipulation and criminality. As we walked away from the ceremony toward our car and the next phase of our lives together, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought us to this moment. Sometimes the people who hurt us most become unwitting catalysts for our greatest growth, revealing strength we never knew we possessed and clarifying values that will guide us through whatever challenges lie ahead. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of a life built on authentic achievement, genuine relationships, and the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing success was earned through honest effort rather than criminal shortcuts. Have you ever faced a situation where someone close to you tried to sabotage your dreams? How did you find the strength to overcome that betrayal and continue pursuing your goals? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else who's facing similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to support others who might need to hear this message of resilience and justice. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity and maintaining integrity when it matters most. And please share this with anyone who might benefit from knowing that betrayal doesn't have to define your future. Sometimes it reveals the strength you never knew you had. Thank you for joining me on this journey from betrayal to triumph. Remember that your integrity is your most valuable possession, and no one can take that away from you unless you choose to give it up. Keep fighting for your dreams, stay true to your values, and never let anyone convince you that dishonesty is the path to success. Until next time, may you find strength in honesty and courage in truth.